4 years ago, I managed to convince the principal of Foothill Middle School that it was past time for the school to have a choral music program. I was well aware of the legendary instrumental program at Foothill. 3 of my own kids had thrived under Kirk Wetterholm's steady and professional guidance. The first 2 followed in the family string tradition and played cello in his orchestras. By the time my youngest was ready to learn an instrument, I declared that our house was already too crowded with 3 cellos, and he needed to choose something smaller. I also knew of the fantastic jazz band tradition that Mr. Wetterholm cultivated at Foothill, so I suggested the trumpet. This was almost heretical in the Anderson family, so I credit Kirk for expanding our horizons beyond our classical heritage. In the fall of 2017, I entered the familiar walls of Foothill's band room, not as a parent this time, but as a teacher. I was extremely nervous that I would be an irritating invader into that sacred space. I knew from my kids that Mr. Wetterholm has famous routines and traditions, and I knew that I might be a huge disruption to that. But of course, Kirk was so gracious and even made me feel that I was truly contributing to the musical culture of the school. Kirk is a wonderful mentor and a true professional. For example, my 94-year-old mother-in-law remembers that 33 years ago, the new band teacher at Foothill came to her violin studio's recital so that he could learn about the musical happenings in the neighborhood. She had taught violin for decades and had pioneered many of the youth orchestras in our community. She was impressed that Kirk took the time to attend her recital. Several years later, the first of my Anderson Pea Soup kids joined Kirk's orchestra with his cello. In case you don't know, Kirk has nicknames for his students, and mine were all Anderson Pea Soup, which became the highlight of driving down Highway 5 thereafter as we watched for their nicknames landmark. My daughter Emma loved how he let the students practice conducting their songs in orchestra after the concert and before the end of the semester. She remembers that one Halloween he dressed up as a baby and conducted the orchestra with his baby bottle. I found out when I shared his room that he has 3 Halloween costumes he cycles through so that no one student ever saw the same costume twice. My youngest, Mitch, was forever sad that when it was his year for the baby costume, his class dropped in the rotating schedule, and he didn't get that pleasure. He also remembers Kirk eating a daily banana and giving a weekly lecture to ensure that no one had forged the signature on his or her practice slip. My daughter also recalls that Kirk would get a look on his face when the orchestra was rehearsing a piece and it was going really well. At the end, he would get a look of intense focus and pride on his face as he sustained and cut off the final note. She remembers feeling so proud and excited, knowing they had sounded really good and he was proud of them. She said that he always took the time at the beginning of class to help students tune who needed help. Even though they had a huge class, he would take the time to help individuals, and she thought that was awesome. Another thing she appreciated about Mr. Wetterholm was how neat and orderly he is. She remembers one time during chair auditions, he took a sip of water in between auditions and set his water bottle down on the table behind the podium. Then after the next audition, he turned around and adjusted the bottle so the label was facing front. She could relate to his needing everything to be placed just right, and she loved it. In addition to keeping an orderly classroom, Mr. Wetterholm expected and received orderly behavior from his students. Mitch recalls that he never raised his voice. He'd just walk over to the board and with his impeccable handwriting add another minute to the dismissal time for the day. Kirk had high expectations for his students. Each of my kids were encouraged and participated in solo and ensemble festivals, which exposed them to some really great chamber music and gave them performance experience. He gave so much extra time to make sure his students had all the opportunities possible, not just frequent concerts, but festivals and community events. My kids learned to strive for excellence. They did not want to be remembered as the year that did not earn a unanimous superior rating. My first year at Foothill, when I shared Kirk's room, was a unanimous superior year for all his groups. Because of Kirk's example, I knew that in order to be a legitimate part of the music program, I needed to take my fledgling choir to the CMEA festival to receive feedback. I was hugely relieved when we did well, but I think Kirk was even more delighted than I was. He was truly thrilled that all of our school's groups had excelled. He arranged to have the plaques displayed in the multi-use room. Quoting my son Mitch, "He has a way of pushing me to improve. Every day I would come out of band class wanting to be better. He is also so incredibly encouraging and has a way of getting the best out of everyone. He's incredibly fair. He always explains his reasoning for any decision and never talks down to his students. I always felt respected and cared about while I was in his groups. My love for music and performing was largely formed during my years in band at Foothill. Band was always one of the classes I looked forward to the most every day." Unquote. Words cannot adequately express what an exceptional teacher and individual we have had in our midst. I feel exceptionally blessed to have been part of his sphere. Thank you, Kirk, for everything you are and everything you have done for thousands of students and their families. Thank you for your example and hard work and friendship for all of us. You are the best. Let the band play on.